7 o'clock. I'm going to turn on this little thing. I don't like technology, and I don't do it very well, so sorry if I drop it. I was just explaining this is not being mic'd. It is being recorded to be for simulcast, if anybody wants to get online and watch it. And that's what this is. So if you can't hear me, please let me know, because there's no microphone. I know so many of you, but a few I don't. My name is Kathleen Tully, and I'm the Director of Music here at St. Patrick Church. I've been here about 28 or 29 years. I was trying to remember, so something like that. And I am the principal organist and choir director and all that stuff. And tonight, we are gathered to talk a little bit about the Marian Antiphons, because in conjunction with starting to say the St. Michael the Archangel prayer at the end of Mass, we're incorporating the use of the Marian Antiphons at the end of Mass. We've made that commitment for this next year, so it will be a different Marian Antiphon depending on the season, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But it will take the place of the closing hymn, except for a few occasions. Christ the King, when we have brass and it's big, it's the end of the year. Christmas Day, I think, will probably still have a hymn. Maybe Easter Sunday, I don't know. Well, I guess that's all to be kind of determined. But for the most part, we'll be doing the Marian Antiphons. And why would we want to do the Marian Antiphons? There's lots of reasons. First of all, they're beautiful. They're beautiful pieces of music. They're beautiful prayers to the Blessed Virgin Mary. They bind us as Catholics around the world and through time. They've been around a long time, and there have been Catholics who've sung these hymns for a long time. It's a shared musical heritage in the Western Church. Well, and even in other parts of the Church, they do versions of these antiphons. And it gives our Blessed Mother a place there at the end of Mass to be reminded of her role. We're chosen to do the traditional, simple Gregorian chant versions of these hymns for a couple different reasons. They're the ones a lot of people know. They're the most common in the Roman Church, and they're already in our hymnal. So a lot of reasons why we chose to do that thing. Gregorian chant is having its day. It's on the upswing and coming back, and I'm so happy. People will tell you that Vatican II said no more Gregorian chant, but it didn't. It said very clearly in the documents that the Gregorian chant is a treasure of inestimable value. It's greater even than that of any other art. So there you go. One of the things that we have to talk about before we get too far along is the use of Gregorian chant notation, or chant notation, as opposed to modern notation. And we kind of flip back and forth between the two around here. I find that people who've never had any music education find Gregorian chant easier to read in a lot of ways. If you've had some music education and you've never done Gregorian chant, sometimes that's a stumbling block because you want to use the same rules. But the basic ideas are the same. When the notes go up, the pitches go up. When the notes go down, the pitches go down. In both cases, there aren't a whole lot of markings for rhythm. Rhythm comes from some of the markings that are on the music, but also in tradition. The Dominicans will tell you they do a version of the Salve, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, that the first time I ever heard it, Father Ambrose said, just sing along with them. And he handed me the music, and I'm a very capable chant reader. And I realized within about, 20 notes, that the pitches were all the same, but they were all singing all kinds of rhythms, but they were all together. They knew what their tradition was. So that will become part of the thing for us as well. I have some handouts. Here's this one. So once you get these handouts, the first folded handout are all four of what are called the Marian Antiphons, the great antiphons sometimes, people will say. The half piece of paper that you get is a copy directly from our hymnal, which is the Salve Regina in modern notation. Some things that you'll notice, we're not going to go into a deep learning of how to read chant notation, but I will point out some things that you'll notice. The chant notation only has 4 lines, and modern music is usually written on 5. It's primarily because the 5 lines were developed once more instruments were playing and you needed more space to keep the notes on the staff. But in Gregorian chant, almost everything can fit within those 4 lines, the singing voice. The range is not that big. So there's that. You'll see that the modern notation, let's see, where'd the modern notation go? Thank you. The modern notation's on 5 lines. They did do some things to try to incorporate chant notation. For instance, on the last 2 lines on the O clemens, O pia, O clemens, O pia, O dulcis, they have that little squiggly line. That's actually a note, and it's trying to mimic a kind of chant notation that shows you that the first note is a little bit longer, then it has energy going up to that zigzag, up to the 3rd note. So that's a little strange thing where they've incorporated some chant markings with the modern notation. And the other thing before we get started talking about these things is I want to point out that there are simple versus solemn and or monastic forms of all these chants. And the forms that we are using, when you go looking for them, if you want, on YouTube, you're looking for the simple forms of all the chants. The solemn forms are just as you might expect. They're more florid, they have bigger range, they're more complicated in the way they're structured, and they were used more for festive days, for solemn occasions, and in monastic houses where they were singing them all together often. Often when you hear people say, we're going to do the Dominican Salve, they're not wrong, but it's really more like even like the Roman solemn form. Does that make sense? So the forms that we are all singing here, the next 4, these 4 antiphons, are all the simple form. And the last thing I'm going to say before anybody thinks of it is to mention that there are different kinds of chants. The biggest collection used currently are chants of the Gregorian school of chant. But the Dominicans have their own chant tradition, their own book, their own collection. Sometimes those chants are very similar to the Roman. Sometimes they're off by 1 note. Sometimes they're very different than the Roman chants. My favorite example of that is the first year I was here, they sang the Alleluia at the Easter Vigil. Alleluia, right? And I thought, oh, he missed the note, the first interval, because in the Roman form, it's 1 interval shorter. It's a minor 3rd. In the Dominican, it's Alle. So he did the first time round, we all answered. Second time round, 3rd time round, I thought, we'll have to work on that. Then, the next year it happened again. Nobody thought to tell me it was different. The next year it happened again, and then I mentioned it. And they said, oh, no. The Dominican chant is 1 interval higher. So, things like that. There are 4 Marian Antiphons that are used seasonally. There are way more songs to Mary, more chants, more hymns, more antiphons. These are the 4 what sometimes are referred to as the 4 great antiphons. These 4 originated, they're called antiphons, but they aren't used anymore generally as antiphons. An antiphon is usually a response, and then there are psalms that are put with it, and then the response. And at some point down the line, pretty early on, the psalms were taken out, and the hymns were, the antiphons were continued more like hymns. This was sort of solidified in 1239. Pope Gregory IX made an order that they needed to be sung at the end of the divine office. And once they started doing that, they started doing it without the verses, the psalm. It is, all of these antiphons are used. You guys anybody do the Liturgy of the Hours? You do Compline, night prayer? They're sung traditionally at the end of Compline, end of night prayer. And they are called seasonal because they change with the liturgical seasons. So I have put up some notes here just for reference. And I thought we would talk through the four and the seasons that they go with, and we'll start with the first thing of the year, which is Advent. And that would be the Alma Redemptoris Mater. The number 5 indicates what number it is in your hymnal, just so you know. It's coming up, it'll be in the hymnal. It's sung from Advent to the end of traditional Christmas, which is February 2nd, presentation of the Lord in the temple, or Candlemas. The message during this antiphon is beautiful. You can see a translation on the folded piece that I handed to everybody. And it kind of focuses more on Gabriel's message, Mary's divine motherhood, sort of those sorts of areas. The text is credited to Hermann the Cripple, or Hermann the Lame. He was a German Benedictine monk, and he lived between 1013 and 1054. It's a very popular tune. Many composers have written beautiful settings of it. One of the most favorite for choir members around the world is the setting by Palestrina. Our choir does it almost every year during Advent and Christmas. Cardinal Newman wrote a translation, Kindly Mother of the Redeemer, sort of based on that same text. Was very popular in Norman Ireland and in the Catholics of England. Sing that tune. And we're not going to sing through all of these tonight, but if you want to find a good recording on YouTube, make sure you look for the simple tone and the Benedictine. There's one of a Benedictine monastery that comes up at the top. That's a good recording. The Alma Redemptoris Mater also comes to us in English literature. It's the prioress or the prioress in Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales talks about singing the Alma Redemptoris Mater. So again, been around a long time. The next thing in the liturgical season then comes after Candlemas to the Wednesday of Holy Week, so the end of Lent, and that's the Ave Regina Caelorum, and that's also in our hymnal at number 45. They have markings of its earliest appearance in collections in the 12th century. Some attribute it to the same monk, but there's not firm scholarship that would say that. One of my favorite translations of that translates one of the lines as, "Hail the door through which the light of the world is risen." I just think that's a beautiful line. Yes, we will. I've got a pronunciation sheet. We're going to be good. Well, you guys are going to be good.
Just curious, because there's a lot of people that when you sing Latin, they go.
Isn't that too bad? Yeah. Well, we'll be singing this every week. So hopefully on week 3, yep. Hopefully they'll want to join us. Join everybody. The next of the antiphons is the Regina Caeli, and that is in our book at number 61, and that's from the Easter Vigil to Pentecost. Again, all of these have these simple forms and solemn forms, and composers for all these years have been inspired to write beautiful settings of these different things. our choir here knows two versions of the Regina Caeli, one by Loti, which gets sung almost every year at some point during Easter. The Regina Caeli you might be familiar with because it replaces the Angelus prayer during the Easter season, and it's in that little box in the bulletin all Easter long, and that's the same things. It's the one that appears around the year 1200 and has a lot of stories to it. Some of the legends, like the Golden Legend stories, talk about St. Gregory the Great reciting these words to ward off pestilence in Rome, and when he looked up, he says that he said the three first lines were the composition of the angels, and on the fourth one, he saw an angel sheath the sword of pestilence, and the pestilence left Rome. So that's one of the legends. You know that one?
That's why they call it Pestis and Angelo.
Yeah.
Because he appeared on top of
Appeared on
that monument.
the house. The
Statue.
Father Edmund. Do you guys know Father Edmund? He's they've heard of you. He knows lots about old things, especially. He's great at history stuff. They know for certain, so they had the words early on. They had this chant tune can be found in collections as early as the 14th century, 1300s. So it got set to tune pretty quickly. We also know this in a poetic translation. It's been sung with slightly different translations, but it's set to the hymn tune, Be Joyful Mary. Similar text. Yeah, inspired by that text, right? So you have the where's the Regina Caeli, the word-for-word translation. Queen of heaven, rejoice, alleluia, for he whom thou wast chosen to bear, alleluia, has risen as he said, alleluia. So be joyful, Mary, heavenly queen, alleluia. That's a similar verse. There is a good collection, a recording of that, also the simple version with the chant running while you can follow it to sing it at the Benedictine monks of Santo Domingo. And it's great. And now for our star of the night, the Salve Regina.
Yeah, I see two versions.
So the Salve Regina, is better known Hail Holy Queen, known to most people because it's the prayer said at the end of the Rosary. Yeah. And it's done in the ordinary form from Pentecost to Advent. Well, the day after Pentecost to Advent. So ordinary time. This one also gets attributed to Herman the Cripple, but it's pretty clear that there are versions of it pretty early on. There are forms of it that can be found as early as the year 600, so it's a very, very old prayer. And by the year 1000 or so, it's being used at Cluny. In 1220, the general chapter at Cluny ordered the daily chanting of it in the high altar. And sort of the other connection to us is in the year 1221, actually. I actually have a year here. In 1221, the Dominicans began to do a procession after Compline using that hymn. And because Dominicans were spread far and wide, the practice kind of spread far and wide and became very popular. And they find it in the modernized Franciscan breviary of the Middle Ages and The 1300s, and the Carthusians are singing at Vespers, and it spread like wildfire once the Dominicans got a hold of it. Another interesting thing about the Salve Regina is that I found some writings that Martin Luther in particular found it obnoxious and several times denounced it. All the more reason to sing it with great vigor. Sometimes it is also attributed to Saint Bernard, and I think that's it. We're going to sing, starting this week, the simple form of the Salve. But if you've been to things here at St. Patrick's, I'm sure you've heard the Dominicans sing the Dominican form of it, which is a little fancier and very beautiful. There's some talk about maybe somewhere down the line we'll do that too, but I think we'll start with this version. So one of the things about singing these chants is that being able to pronounce the Latin is helpful, yeah? And the good news is that Latin pronunciation is much simpler than English. But I have a handy dandy pronunciation sheet. This is a guide developed for singing Latin. It leans American, Father. Because believe it or not, there are accents in Latin. As a matter of fact, in one of those recordings, it's a French abbey, and that's one of my favorites because all it's Alleluia, very, the accent comes through. The nice thing about Latin, singing in Latin, is the vowels are all beautiful and open, and they stay pretty stable. The A's are always ah, the E's are always eh, the I's are always e, the O's are always o, U's are always u, and the Y is always treated like a vowel, like the I, except when it's a y, which sometimes it is printed that way. Then you have these couple of combined vowels. And I think that the trickiest ones to try to remember, that you just learn usually by repetition, are the way that C in liturgical Latin are pronounced. So if the C comes before a vowel, A, O, or U, it's a K sound. But ch, a soft sound ch before E, I, and those combined, those pressed A, E, and O, E, and Y sounds. Two C's together become ch, etche, and CH is hard like a K, K. Those are the trickiest sounds and the ones that you need for singing most of the antiphons. The back has some of the trickier ones. G is the same, it has some similar things to the C. It's hard, like in g, g, got, before A, O, and U. But it's a soft vowel, j, before E, I, and the A, E, O, E, and Y. And the GN is the nya, like señor. So when we sing Agnus Dei, Spanish is a Latin-based language, and they have the enya, the N with the little symbol above it, the nya sound. That's that GN together sound. And the one tricky one, H is silent, as it is in French, right? Another Latin-based language. They talk a little bit about the consonant, the J, sounds like the consonant Y, and in some editions, it is replaced by an I. You'll see the name of Jesus sometimes spelled this way, sometimes like this way. PH is f. Oh yeah, and R. R is a troublesome consonant for Americans because we have this very back R sound. And so R's are generally not rolled but flipped. Da, 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 if you can. S is always hard, as in pass. But if it's between two vowels, you'll sometimes hear misere, a little softer. SC is sh before the soft vowels. Sk before A, O, and U. TH is always hard like Thomas. T. And this is the one that everybody has to argue about in choir every time it comes up. The TI is most of the time it's a hard vowel, except if it falls, or a hard consonant, unless it falls between two vowels. Oh, and TI. TI, it is, they teach Cia, C. What have we missed?
The fact that it has a TI and it's different.
Yeah.
Sorry.
E-I-E-I-O, yeah.
You figure you only got like half a second when you're singing. Just buzz past it. Nobody will know you missed it. Right?
Yeah. And the Z is softened. Z. Father Edmund has spent a lot more time. This was singing Latin. Do you have anything that you want to?
Silent H at the beginning of the word.
Yeah.
When we say hodie, this was not.
Do you say hodie? Nobody, yeah. Odie. Odie. Singers don't. Singers say odie.
Solitaris Ostia.
Yeah, salutaris ostia. Yeah.
It'll probably get Americanized when we sing it.
Well, I mean, so these directives would be sort of the gold standard for singing Latin, and it's ecclesiastical Latin. It's church Latin and not classical Latin. So if you've taken classical Latin, those would be different pronunciations. And there is regional Latin. The Germans don't pronounce this the same way as the French pronounce it, exactly as the Italians pronounce it, as the Americans pronounce it. Even when they're singing their form of Latin beautifully, there are things that are done differently. And real sticklers will even, in big professional choirs especially, if you're singing a piece that was written by a German composer with Latin, they'll adjust the pronunciation a little bit to reflect that. So there are differences in that, and the other thing that you'll see a lot is a lot of American conductors argue whether that's the church Latin. If you look at O on this, it's O like in motion, and some will say O is AW. They'll say do, aw. So dominus as opposed to dominus. You'll hear that. So everybody doesn't always agree. Father says the H's before his hodie. The words that are the trickiest, I think, for singers are the words that look like words in English. So, for instance, this word, we say in, but if you were singing it in Latin, you'd sing more of an ing. Tall. Because we all in Central Ohio go to benediction, right? You'll hear choir members sing benedictus, but the vowels are the same here. Benedictus, benedictus. So the trickiest Latin words are actually the words that look like English words, I think. And I tell the choir all the time, it's not a sin to be from Ohio, but it is a sin to sing like it. So. So let's take a minute. Now we're going to spend some time and look at this Salve Regina. You can pick your version that you like. I passed out two. The one that's in modern notation that comes from the hymnal. If you want to work your way through the chant notation, anybody need these things? Everybody got everything? If you want to work your way through the chant notation that starts on the inside of the fold, you're welcome to do that. Forgot to bring my pitch pipe over, so I'm going to have to use my phone pipe. Sorry. So I'm starting like with the modern notation, and I'm starting on that C. So how many people, probably everybody, I would be surprised. Anybody here never sung this here? Because we do it pretty often. Let's just sing it through, because my feeling is probably this is going to be good. Let's try it. Salve Regina, Mater misericordiae, vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve. A te clamamus, exulas filii Eve, a te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in ac lacrimam ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte, et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende. O clemens, O pia, O dulcis Virgo Maria. Nice. Yeah, our editor for our hymnal gave Herman credit for that one too. So, were there any things there that you were surprised by? Anybody have anything that was surprising because maybe you've only kind of learned it by rote and never looked at it? No big surprises? What? The little squiggles? Yeah. So that has the form of when you're reading it. You have the lower note, and then the squiggle note, and then the note above. It's always in an ascending note. It's always in an ascending note, and the idea is that this one you sort of put the energy here, and then it's a little faster movement to the upper one. It's always from a lower note to a higher note. I have my I was just telling somebody I have terrible allergies, and I can barely sing for about 8 weeks. I sound like a frog that smokes 2 packs a day. I'm glad you guys all singers. Guys are all singing well. The other thing that you can see, and it happens in the chant notation too, is they'll make notes longer 2 different ways, 3 different ways. One is by putting notes right next to each other. They each get a pulse. Some traditions will even sing each one of those pulses, but we don't generally in the United States. We usually sing them. Ah. The other way would be to put a line over it. It's like a little caress. The other way that you'll see in most chant music is to put a dot after it. And the dot makes it double. Unless you're a Dominican, and then nothing has any marks at all. And you just have to know the rules. The first time I learned it, the Dominican that was showing me different things gave me all these rules. And then he sang it for me. And I said, but you said this and this and this, but you did this and this and this. And he said, yeah, but it sounds better the way I did it. So every house has its own tradition. Are there questions about that? Yeah.
So I have a question, like, sometimes you see the three notes go on the same line, like on the last line, described. And then there's two that have just the dash above that. Is that because this is only two and this is three? Or is
Yes.
that
And this is not a whole, this is just like a little caress. It's just a little bit longer, the line.
okay.
He's talking about in the second to the last line, no bees, that little line. And why don't they just put a line over the others? It's like in the O dulcis. They want you to hold those 3 full counts, 3 full pulses.
And what's the little bar again? The little
A
bar?
double,
It's a double.
like a double. And then the bottom line is when you're singing with a congregation, there's a little bit of humility involved. Everybody has to sing together, so sometimes it's not quite as firm as the rules. Because you don't.
Before and after. Report is the first week and report us, at
Right.
Advent. So as your church family, we can feel really good
Yeah,
about
yeah.
chanting better.
yeah. Yeah.
Can I ask real quick? I mean, just because I have one person in my family who can read music,
Mm-hmm.
play music, everybody else just learns what they hear. And so, I mean, this is the Salve Regina that I've always heard us singing here for many years. But if I were to look it up on Spotify and, like you were just giving some different, I'm writing this down so I can make a
Yeah.
playlist at home.
So you're always looking for a version that's the simple tone.
Simple time.
And there was,
You told us a few things for the Redemptoris Mater and the Regina Coeli. So
Yeah.
if I just looked up simple tone, Salve Regina, and it
Mhm.
sounds
especially if it's coming from if the recording was made at a monastic community, those are usually pretty firm. There is a version of that Salve by those Benedictine monks of Santo Domingo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Are there any questions about any of that? I would be happy to try to answer from what I know and have learned so far. Yeah.
Repeat again,
Oh.
what's the proper way to read the note with the line above it?
It's just lengthened a little bit.
Okay.
I always call it a caress.
1.5?
No, not even. Just a it's just a caress. It's just you're lingering on the note a little bit.
We're starting Salve Regina this weekend, is that correct?
Sorry?
Are we starting it this weekend? Salve
This weekend. Yeah. And so we will do it at the end of Mass, starting this Sunday for every Sunday until the first Sunday of Advent, at which point we will change and do the next Marian Antiphon, the next seasonal antiphon, and that would be the Alma Redemptoris Mater. And that will be familiar to people if you come to Vespers, because we sort of break the rule and sing it at the end of Vespers so that we all get to sing it.
Will there be the translations? I mean, okay, so we're gonna say Salve Regina first. And it's a little easier because it's like Hail Holy Queen and
Mhm.
pray, but the other antiphons, will there be any translations that appear?
Yes.
Just so like we can learn what the words.
You might have to, so we've been discussing about how we're going to do it. I think it'll be in a box in the bulletin for a few weeks each time we start them. And I think that The plan is the ordo that we make that tells you where to find the pages for the readings. I think we're going to put the translations of those 4 antiphons in that little booklet. So, yeah. So it'll be referred to on the hymn board just like a hymn. It'll say just number 5 every week for the next 8 weeks or whatever. Yeah.
Starting off with the best one.
Yeah, it's the one that's the most well known here.
Yeah.
We sing that for Vespers often. Youth group, I don't know if they still are because I don't have anybody that age. They still sing the Salve every week. They end their adoration singing this simple Salve, so they know they've got it. They sort of know it. And all of these we've sung like once during the season, just at Mass at the offertory. We've always sung one time the Alma Redemptoris Mater for at least the last 10 years. So it's not like you've never sung them, but it's just going to be more consistent for the year.
These are all in the hymnal.
They're all in the hymnal, in modern notation. They're all in Latin and no translation. I know, that's the sad part. I don't know why they chose not to do that, because they put translations in the Missal, it's the same company, for all the prayers, but they did not do it for a lot of and some of the hymns they do have a translation and some they don't. There are a lot of things. The history of that book is that we got it for a very good price. It was kind of a prototype, and what part of the deal was that I was making notes at things that were found that were wrong, and then the company decided not to continue with that project and switched over to, you'll see in a lot of parishes, Source and Summit. It's the same people, except it's their new product. So there are a lot of funny things in our hymnal because of that, but we also got it for a very good price since we were doing it. And lots of things are very solid. Are there other questions?
Yeah, on the Ave Regina,
Celor?
there's a little upside down flag that's open. In the notation, is that a rest or what is that? I forget what that is.
Yeah, it's a flat.
It's a flat.
Mm-hmm. It's a flat note. Did you see what she's saying in the Ave Regina Celorum in the first line? There's a little, it kind of looks upside down, but that's a flat. That note is flatted. It's lowered a half step. In the chant notation when you're reading it, the first note is just picked by whoever starts the chant. So if you were a group of all men, you might start the chant a little lower. If you're a group of all women, you might start the chant a little higher. And if you're the baby bear, you're looking for the chant that's just right? In the middle. If you have men and women, you find something kind of that isn't too awful for everybody. So those notes don't indicate specific pitches. They just indicate relationships to pitches. And the thing to learn, I've talked a lot of times about doing a kind of like an introduction to Gregorian chant. Is there enough interest in that if we did something like that, you think? Okay, so the thing to know about Gregorian chant is there are only 2 clefs. One looks like this. So let's see, are all of these do clef? Yeah. And that's do. And the other one kind of looks like this, and that's fa. And the step right below both those clefs is the only half step that you have to know in music. It's only so it would be like going from a black note on the piano to a white note, half step. The rest of them are all whole steps. And if you start at the top of let's say I tell you, let's look at the Salve Regina. We'll do this is a little introduction to chant. If you're looking at the Salve Regina that we just sang, that you all sort of know because you've all sung it before, you did really well. I thought we'd have to do that 2 or 3 times, but you were great. If I tell you that pitch is do, and you can sing Joy to the World, joy to the world, the Lord is come. Those are the steps from do down to the bottom of the thing, right? It's just a scale down. So you can go, do, joy to the world, the Lord is come. That's the bottom note. It happens to be do at the end of the octave. And that's how you would find your pitch with Gregorian chant. Or the conductor just gives it to you, the other easy way. Salve Regina, Salve Regina. Steps and jumps, Pierre. It would take.
I'm listening.
I would be happy to do it. I mean, it's beyond what we can do here tonight, but I'd be happy to do an introduction to reading Gregorian chant.
Are there three people from the choir coming down to help us, or are we just gonna sing it when we hear who started it?
Well, there's no choir this week, so they'll be in the pews.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Choir doesn't start till, the choir sings next week for Rosary Sunday. Yeah, that's the first choir Sunday. So there'll be choir people in the pews. Yeah. The tricky one's going to be the Alma Redemptoris Mater and the Ave Regina Caelorum, which is actually one of my favorites, but I think is the trickiest of the four to learn. But we will do a similar thing like we did tonight, and we'll do a teaching, not so much background, but we'll just teach the chant if people want to come in and learn it.
So are these going to be like our recessionals?
So there'll be no, this came about, Father Paul felt strongly that he wanted to incorporate the prayer, the St. Michael the Archangel prayer at the end of Mass. And it can't be said until Mass is officially over, which is after the priest gives the final blessing and kisses the altar. And we were talking about ways that we could do it to make it not, I don't know, for lack of a better word, awkward. And there were some options, and one of the options was we could just, there is no rule that says there has to be a recessional hymn. It can be just a piece of music or silence like we've done at Lent the last few years. And one of the suggestions as we were all talking about it was this idea of incorporating these Marian Antiphons with the hope that people would learn them and maybe memorize them and make them part, and by memorizing and learning them, maybe you'll sing them as part of your family prayer. And I know that there have been many times in the last few years of my life where I have been in a situation where I have sung a Salve Regina from memory because it needed to be done. So I think that there's a lot to be said about learning something in repetition. And by learning these, you will have entered into something that the whole Universal Church sings on a regular basis and have for over 1,000 years in some form or another. It's a big connection.
I used to still do the brass with the crown hymn with their crowns. I guess I vote for keeping that song. Yeah. That's always so powerful on Easter when you sing
Yeah.
for the choir sings that.
Well, I mean, and that's what we were saying. It won't replace, it will be the predominant form, but I think in some of these bigger masses where we have traditionally, for instance, had a lot of brass, we'll probably sing a recessional hymn. Yeah. Recessional hymns won't completely disappear, but this will be, at least for this year, this is the commitment we're making. I'm sorry, say that again? That's the plan for now, yeah. It's the plan for now is every Mass but the 7 a.m. because that's a very quiet Mass. If somebody starts it, yeah, if one of the friars starts it, I could see that you could argue that, right? It'll be harder because there's, we're going to reference it with the number on the hymn board so people can find it. But maybe, who knows, in a year from now when we've done all these, people will just break into song. Wouldn't that be awesome? I like that idea. You all have my permission. Start it. Are there any other questions about how this is working? Father Paul's coming in 5 minutes to talk about the St. Michael the Archangel prayer, so I have to hold you for, we can take a break, but I would ask you to stick around until 8 o'clock. He wants to do a little bit of an introduction to that.
I might just have a suggestion just because I don't know Lisa very well, but at home through the years, like when we prayed at Gloria or the Creed,
Oh,
that we could share, and then if people wanna pray and sing at home, different Latin mass parts, or, like, I know we're doing a new, I can't remember which mass part, but I know I'm still learning it. It's,
oh, probably the Mortem Tuum, the Mysterium Fidei.
yes,
Yeah.
or something else, but when I can find it and then we can play it at home, then everybody's like, okay.
Yeah, I know people that do that. I think I can't say yes or no to that because I think there might be legal ramifications of that. I know that I have a license and I have a choir folder that has stuff on it that the choir members can access, but I don't know about putting something on an open, I guess if it's an open source on YouTube. I'll have to do a little looking about that.
I don't know, I just wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah,
Something that
that's not a bad idea.
a long time ago, because I remember thinking, even the altar boys, it'd be so nice if they knew the Latin mass parts, you know, like the minister, different things that we do during different seasons,
Mhm.
Latin-wise. Anyway, it was just something we did a long time ago, but I'm just gonna add to the playlist with some of these.
Link it on the parish website. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Hmm. Yeah, that's a great idea. Just have to find out if there's any reason why we can't. I can't think of any. I think we have a. Yeah, I don't know. I would have to see. I have to ask the right questions to the right people, but I don't know why we couldn't. Do the
Flock notes accommodate? Can flock notes accommodate audio, video?
I don't know the answer to that. Yeah.
It seems like it has a lot of features, I mean, maybe Father Palmer
Yeah. No, I would think.
send out a link, like
Yeah.
it says,
Yeah. No, it's not a. That's a good idea.
and then people can hear.
I was curious, Father Edmund, do the communities in other parts of the world, do you do, like does anybody still do a big, the procession at the Salve Regina at Compline? Okay. House of Studies do it, do you know? Yeah. Yeah, I was told that in a lot of communities, if they have bigger communities, especially if they yeah, they have to have, and they have the walk, the cloister walk or whatever, they do a procession at the end. Yeah. Yeah, big enough crowd and a big enough space. Did you hear what he said about the Dominicans in Bologna sing the Salve and process to St. Dominic's tomb and Compline? That's cool. I do have one more thing. This is just, I was thinking more for actually people like you, families, but anybody can have them. I think I made 10 copies of each one. It's each one of those with a pretty picture and the title and the times when it would happen. So if anybody has any reason that they might want that for classes, children, or just because you love that sort of thing, I have 10 of each kind. And I'll leave that here for when Father Paul's done. Any other questions? Any mysterious thing you've ever wondered about in music at St. Patrick's?
Thank you, it's the most beautiful thing.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, we're kind of, you are a star choir group here. You keep a positive face on it and help those people who don't love singing in Latin because they find it mystifying. And there are people, I know, and Father will say, oh no, the people, St. Patrick's love to sing Latin. I said, I've talked to some that don't. They tell me afterwards, when are we going to stop singing this Latin stuff? So.
Kathleen, question, were there any other options besides the Marian Antiphons we considered for the other mass, or is there a reason why we picked these in particular?
Well, there were other options. The reasons I think these were picked were all of those reasons we talked about at the beginning. They connect us to a tradition of music and there's a long tradition of singing these antiphons at the end of Mass as a way of incorporating a devotion to the Blessed Mother that's with the sort of the end of the liturgy. For instance, I know that at the Masses at the Vatican at Easter time, all of them ended with Regina Coeli last year, so it's something that's done. And I think we were hoping that it would give people an opportunity to sing these great hymns of the past, to have them under your belt if you wanted to say Compline and sing them at the end of Compline. Yeah. They're not long. That's another reason. That's the practical reason also, because if you want to incorporate the prayer to St. Michael the Archangel, I hate to say it, but our liturgy planning here has one small element of planning by parking. You can't have things go too long on those middle masses on Sunday morning, so finding that thing that was meaningful, but not too long, so that the St. Michael the Archangel prayer could be incorporated.
So these will be sung as the priest is processing through the
Right.
church.
They're gonna reverence the altar. They're gonna come down out of the sanctuary. They're gonna stand there for beginning of the Salve, and they're gonna walk towards the end of the Salve. When they get to the back, they're gonna start the St. Michael the Archangel prayer.
Oh, so this will come before the same.
Yep. This will be sung like a recessional hymn.
Maybe after a couple of years, I might actually remember the words. That'd be really nice.
For the St. Michael the Archangel prayer, or
Well,
for
that
these?
too, yeah. Well, I have to remember the right words because we do a slightly different version of St. Michael.
Yeah.
But no, sometimes I'll be somewhere else and we'll start singing the Regina Coeli or the Salve Regina. I'll be like, ba, ba, ba. I wish I knew the words.
La 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 la.
It's a good chant. I might know the words.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're going to have, 8 or 9 weeks. How many weeks of Christmas are there? It's all of there's Advent, and then Christmas would be the Ave Regina, or nope, the Amen Redemptoris Mater. Advent all through Christmas, all the way till February the 2nd. So that's 8, 9 weeks, 10 weeks. Yeah.
We're gonna feel really.
Yeah. Plus Vespers. We sing it at Vespers, so you'll have double if you come to Vespers on Sunday night.
One big change, I guess. We used to leave in silence during Lent, but now we're going to sing.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. That would be my interpretation of that. It's such a beautiful chant, the Ave Regina Coelorum, and the words are just wonderful. Hail, Queen of Heaven. What's that? Maybe. Again, allergies, froggy.
I would never know your allergies.
Well, you're being very nice. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to play you a version of it, because my voice is very rough. I want you to hear something nice.
See it like America.
Father Edmund and I were talking about the fact that the Coelorum is spelled different ways. Sometimes with an O-E, sometimes with a A-E. And he's a much smarter Latin person than I am. And you're gonna give me a, this one is the one that's the lesser known. Not the least known, but the lesser known. Hey, Father, come on in. We're going to... Okay. So this is the Ave Regina Caelorum. I wasn't playing examples. I would have brought my little speaker, but so you're just going to have to deal with the. Yeah, it's a beautiful chant. That's the trickiest of the four, I think, partially because it's just not as well known. And the translation is on your sheet, and it's a beautiful translation. That one, I think, is that the one that was first composed as an antiphon for the Assumption, I think, I think that's the one, when the Assumption was first. Yeah. So that's where that originally came from, I think. I think that's the one. Awesome. Any more questions? Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and feel free to contact me. They'll all be in the hymnal. And before, I brought this over with me, Father, so that you can reference it if you want. It's the, nope.
Go there.
Yep.
The prayer. Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Do you want
Yeah,
the-
I'll take the mic so I can.
Da-da-dun-dun.
Thank you. All right. All right. Well, thank you, Kathleen, for talking about the antiphons. And, tonight, for the last, half hour or so, I'm going to talk more about the prayer to St. Michael the Archangel, or also part of my decision, to implement this, or what went into making this now how will be a prayer at the end of Mass. So a couple of things, to consider. First of all, just on a practical level, I don't know how much you touched upon this, but when the discussion came up about incorporating the St. Michael prayer at the end of our Sunday Masses, this was a question of the logistics. Like, do we do it when the priest is at the chair before the closing hymn? Or do we do it after the hymn, which could be a little tricky if it's a long hymn or if there's a postlude or people are leaving the church. And this is how this discussion then came about, to then do the Marian Antiphon in place of the recessional hymn, and then the priest will begin the St. Michael prayer after the antiphon from the back of the church. Because that was another concern that came up too, is that, should the priest do it from the chair? Because in the general instruction of the Roman Missal, it says that after the final blessing and dismissal, he goes to reverence the altar. So that's still part of his instructions for Mass. So doing the St. Michael prayer before that would seem to insert something before what is called upon in the Church's liturgy. So, it's after that is over, though, at the conclusion of Mass, or how you get out of the sanctuary, that's where the Church gives a lot of freedom, whether it's with the music, whether it's with an antiphon, with a hymn. So those were some of the things that we were discussing just in the logistics. And so what the logistics will be starting Sunday when we do the St. Michael prayer is the priest will give the final blessing and dismissal as usual. The musicians will start the antiphon just like they have the recessional hymn. I've told the altar boys they got to get going. They can't be lollygagging. They got to go right away, because these antiphons could be shorter. I think we'll be fine for the Salve Regina, but yeah, no, it will. But if we have a crucifer who's clueless and doesn't know what to do, no, they all know what they're doing, that they'll need to go. So you'll see the priest come and reverence the altar as usual, come then in front of the altar, genuflect, turn, the recessional will go out as we've always seen it, just as the antiphon is being sung. And then the priest and the altar boys will wait in the back of the church for however long is needed during the end of the antiphon. And then once the antiphon has started, then the priest from the back of the church will say, St. Michael the Archangel. And that's really all he has to do is just invoke the prayer and for the people then to come in and follow. So that's just to give a little logistics of how we are going to do that. And I'm going to explain this in a little shorter version of what I just told you on Sunday at all the masses. I'll come out and just so everybody is aware how this is working or what are going to be the steps involved. So the prayer to St. Michael the Archangel, which I'm sure most or everyone in this room knows, or you've prayed it as a devotion. The version that we know it especially goes back or is attributed to Pope Leo XIII, who was Pope from 1878 to 1903. There's actually an older version of a prayer, of a prayer to St. Michael that our Dominican laity pray during their monthly meetings. So it's a more, I think, medieval prayer attributed to St. Michael, but didn't really take off in popular devotion. This is a prayer attributed to St. Leo. Now, or Pope Leo, maybe Saint one day, but Pope Leo XIII. What do we want to be clear about what this prayer is? It is a devotion. It is not part of the church's liturgy. Really, the liturgy of the church for the Mass ends when the priest gives the dismissal and reverences the altar. So even these antiphons are properly speaking not part of the liturgy, but we could say they're liturgical because they follow, as Kathleen has gone over, something specific to the season. They are incorporated into the liturgy with as a formal part of night prayer, and now we're using them as something to end our Mass. But then the St. Michael prayer is purely a devotion. So people don't have to pray it if they don't want to. If they have some unease praying to an angel, or it's just something it's a devotion that's not theirs, the church is not requiring them to pray it. So I think that's what's important to remember, is that when we start the St. Michael prayer, this is not liturgy, it's devotion. Much as like when we pray the rosary, it's devotion. Devotions are good. Devotions help enhance our spiritual life. They help us deepen our life of faith. They help us grow in our love for the liturgy. They're always pointed toward the liturgy, but they can never take the place of or be incorporated into the liturgy, in a way that goes against the liturgical laws of the church. So that's what we were focusing on, is how can we do this devotion after Mass? And so that's, I think an important thing to remember. The St. Michael prayer would have been prayed after low Mass in the traditional rite. So in the tradition, and if you've been, say to, the traditional Latin Mass, or about the distinctions, you would have had low Mass, you would have had a high Mass, a solemn high Mass, and just different distinctions where a low Mass was pretty much a quiet Mass. It could have been done at a low altar. We might today think of like a daily Mass as like a low Mass because there's no music involved, or there's no, it's much more simpler. But even in the traditional rite, it wasn't so much that a low Mass had no music. I mean, there were requirements needed, specifically when you got to a high Mass, or at least a solemn high Mass, where you needed to have a deacon and subdeacon at a Mass. And very often, you would have like ordained priests would serve in those roles as deacon and subdeacon. So, excuse me, I don't want to get too much into those details, but just to know, like, in the old rite, the difference between a low Mass and a high Mass wasn't just that, there was music at one and not at another. I mean, there were certain rules or regulations about, as you are going to a low Mass or a high Mass, what has to be done or can't be done or is required. So the practice for the St. Michael prayer would have been after low Mass, and these would have been the Leonine prayers, where there would have been a praying of 3 Hail Marys, a Hail Holy Queen, and the St. Michael prayer. I can't remember the exact order of what they were in, but these were prayers that Pope Leo encouraged to be prayed after low Mass, the St. Michael prayer being one of them. So after high Mass, or a solemn high Mass, you wouldn't have had these devotional prayers, because you probably would have had some type of musical recession or some type of postlude being played. So what was the purpose of this in the late 19th century when Leo was Pope? Well, he sees the condition of the world, particularly in this time of the rise of modernity, where modernity in the history of the church is this kind of generic heresy condemned by popes in the 19th century, which covered a number of things. Really, in a way, spun on by the rise of the Industrial Revolution, political revolutions in Europe in the late 20th century, and really a focus on man more than God. Was kind of how this outlook of modernity took on. And you had Pope Pius IX, now blessed. He was really somebody coming strong against modernity. Leo succeeds him, and he sees that there are threats against the church, in this time of the late 19th century, where the church is being undermined, where there's this focus on man rather than God. And so he has in his pastoral heart a desire to address what he sees as attacks against the church. And so this is part of the reason why he encouraged this praying to St. Michael the Archangel, was because it's turning to a heavenly helper, to an archangel who is mentioned in Scripture, in both Testaments. He's obviously most known for his depiction in Revelation, where he is battling Satan. And I think that's where, when you read the text of the St. Michael prayer, it's really, in a way, putting in a small devotion this scene that we find playing out in Revelation. Right? But basically, this entrusting to St. Michael the care and protection of the church, and wanting Catholics all throughout the world to pray this prayer after Mass. And it also speaks to, praying to an angel, to an archangel. This really all comes into our belief in the communion of the saints. Why do we pray, or how can we pray to saints? It's because we believe that after they have died, they are in heaven with God, that there is still a communion with them, that we can ask them for their intercession to pray for us on our behalf. And the same is true of angels. The difference is angels are not and never were humans. This is always an important thing to remember in angelology. Angels are pure spirits created by God, directly created by God as pure spirits. So there's this mistaken notion in many places when a person dies, oh, he died, he went on now, he's an angel in heaven. No, he's not. He's a separated soul. He's a separated soul in heaven, separated from his body, awaiting resurrection. Angels never had bodies, even if they show themselves with a body, in some type of apparition. That's basically something that they take on for the sake of presenting themselves to a human being. But an angel does not have a body. So the question, do angels have wings? That's an easy question. No, because wings are a body. Sorry if I'm, sorry, Clarence. And he didn't get his wings. But, and our St. Michael statue does have wings on there. But part of that is also, why were angels depicted in art with wings? In part it was because of their role as messengers. There's kind of this sign of the heavenly messenger. But that's always important to remember, that the nature of an angel is a pure spirit. A creature like us, with an intellect and a will, a much higher intellect than what we have as human beings, who need to grasp our knowledge through our senses. Whereas an angel has that knowledge, by directly looking at the divine intellect, and then gains that knowledge. We have to go through a body. Now, angels, the state of angels in heaven and the souls of the dead in heaven, the blessed awaiting resurrection, very similar, because the souls of the dead the souls of the blessed in heaven don't have a body at the moment. They're waiting for their bodies. So it's their soul that is able to see God face to face. But it's always important to remember, we as human beings do not become angels when we die. All right? But angels are still part of the church. All right? This is something Christ is called the King of the Angels, because angels were created for service, service to God and to carry out his messages. Christ became man, he established a church, he's the head of the church, and he incorporates the angels into his church to be his messengers, to be his protectors, and to intercede for us. So as part of the communion of saints, we can appeal to the angels just like we can appeal to the saints. And so it's not just to St. Michael. We could do this to any of the archangels, or perhaps if you pray your guardian angel prayer, that's what you're doing. You're praying to an angel, the specific angel. Excuse me, just getting over something from last week. With the guardian angels, you're praying to an angel of the lowest choir of angels, who has been entrusted to watch over you and to protect you. All right? And so hopefully if you do the guardian angel prayer every day, that's a way of doing this, to ask this angel for intercession and protection. So at the St. Michael prayer, it had become customary in Catholic parishes, throughout the world, to pray this at the end of Low Mass, throughout the early part of the 20th century. And then after the Second Vatican Council, the practice tended to go away in many places, with just newer, with the new Mass, and then also just newer ideas or questions about liturgy or with devotion. And so at that point, you don't see the St. Michael prayer too often at the end of Mass. I know a lot of people kept it up, praying it as they would pray their rosary, maybe as an additional thing to add to the rosary. Or as a prayer in itself, it did have a place in Catholic devotion and still remained. But then where do we see, this practice of praying the St. Michael prayer once again after Mass, right? And in a way, it's a rediscovery of this popular devotion from several years ago that maybe over the last 15 years or so, in many places, has started to take on a much more, popular appeal once again. That as Mass is over, praying the St. Michael prayer, in part because it's traditional. But I think, too, what we're seeing is this attack on the church once again. Or more so, if you have young children, attacks on our families. That the evil one is out there, and he's trying to tear down the church, and he's trying to pull people away from Christ. And so I think that has spawned on this desire to try and rediscover a tradition of our faith in turning to St. Michael for his heavenly help. Appealing to the one who defeats Satan in the battle of Revelation, asking for his divine assistance at the end of Mass. And certainly in many places, where a daily Mass might be celebrated, the priest leaves, there's no recessional hymn, it could become an easy thing to pray that. Then you go, but then what about Masses where there's music, where there's a recessional? That's where you have to look at different logistical matters. And then this question of, well, it's not part of the liturgy, so how do you properly incorporate it without violating the church's liturgical laws? Now, Pope Francis, about 2018, there was a statement, again, this is not something like official document or anything, magisterial, but just something in I think a interview where he was giving, where he suggested, to pray the St. Michael prayer, to make it more of a devotion. And I think this is something where then a number of other parishes have kind of taken the Holy Father's lead to, okay, let's start praying the St. Michael prayer, in our parish as a community after Mass, which has a historical tie. So you could see that as well, where, why do we do it after Mass? There's that historical tie going back to Leo XIII. And so, here in the diocese, we've had a number of parishes that have started praying the St. Michael prayer after Mass. I know here there's been a popular desire, for that St. Michael prayer. I myself had always been praying it every day anyway after Mass, just privately. And so this led me at the beginning of July to institute the St. Michael prayer at the end of weekday Masses. And we do it, if you notice, if you ever come to a weekday Mass, the priest does the final blessing and dismissal. He comes to the altar and reverences it first, and then turns. And before he genuflects, he does the St. Michael prayer. So this is something, that we as friars considered. How are we going to do the logistics of this? Because I didn't want to incorporate this without looking at, so that it would end up being haphazard. My thought is, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. And so, It worked out on weekdays. It's been going fine with there, and so now looking to incorporate it into the weekends or masses with music. And I think this is something that, when you consider, why do this prayer after Mass? You've just been to Mass. You've just received the Eucharist. Isn't that enough strength that you need to fight the evil one when you go out into the world? Certainly it is, because it is a sacrament. It's Jesus' body and blood. But I think we can look at it in a sense of a fittingness, that what is the best way for us as Catholics who go out into the world? Because think about how the Mass ends. The priest says, go forth. The Mass is ended. We are sent out. We're sent out with the body of Christ in our souls, but we're also sent out into a crazy world that is trying to tear at the church, that's trying to tear at our families, it's trying to tear people away from Christ. And so we rely on the saints and the angels as our intercessors or our protectors as we go out. Think of it this way. If it's raining out, when you go out of a building, when it's raining, is the rain going to kill you? Okay, maybe not, unless it's acid rain, or acid rain will get to you over a while. Am I stepping into the talking science when I shouldn't? All right, but yeah, the rain is going to affect us. It's going to be annoying. So what do? We get an umbrella as that extra help, or we'll put on a raincoat and an umbrella to help us against the rain so it doesn't batter us as we go out. So we could think of that as a metaphor for when we as members of the body of Christ go out into the world after worshiping the Lord in the Eucharist, receiving his body and blood. We now go out into the world with these extra protectors and intercessors to help us, namely Our Lady, the Mother of God, who is the greatest intercessor, the Queen of the angels, who is the Mother of the Church, watching over us, protecting us, keeping us close to her Son, but also then the protection of the angels. That we ask St. Michael to watch over us, or to think about, if parents, if you have done, say, the guardian angel prayer, ask your guardian angel to watch over your children when you put them to bed at night. It's this sense of you're calling upon these heavenly intercessors to watch over and protect us as we go out. And especially calling upon St. Michael because of the way he is depicted in Scripture as someone fighting against the enemy. And when we look at the prayer, St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. So it's a reminder that as we go out into the world from the Mass, we're stepping out into a battlefield, a spiritual battlefield. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. So we call upon him for something specific, not just general protection, but particularly against the wickedness and snares of the devil. Then, like any intercessory prayer, remember, we're not putting the saints or the angels, for that matter, on an equal level with God. We are asking for their intercession. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. So it's always God who is the one that defeats the evil one. It's always God who is victorious. But God sends out his soldiers in that battle, Michael being, depicted as, the main one, as of the heavenly court, of the heavenly host, leading, because that's how the next line, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God. So any power that Michael has against the evil one is power given to him by God. Or this is a specific mission entrusted to Michael. Remember, Michael's name literally translates to who is like God. Because when he battled, and when we see this in Revelation, as he defeats the evil one, he's basically making this call, who is like God? No one. Only God is God. And what was the sin of the devil? He was trying to make himself like God. So Michael, by basically making this proclamation, who is like God, is saying that there is no one else. You, Lucifer, are false because you've tried to make yourself God. Michael leads as the heavenly host, trying to, in the battle, to attack the evil one. By the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. And of course, Satan and those evil spirits were all fallen angels? And this is an interesting question St. Thomas Aquinas takes up in the Summa. He talks about the angels, and you have the 9 choirs of angels, and he says even the fallen angels kept their same rank in hell. So there are more powerful demons than others. He asks the question, what rank was Lucifer? St. Thomas says he was a cherub, the second choir. Thomas's argument is based on the seraphim, who are known for their utter charity of God, their love of God. There's no way that they could have fallen because they were so in love with God. The cherubim are known for their great wisdom and knowledge, but that could also lead to pride. And so that's where Satan was. He was one of the cherubs and fell. So think about next time you call your children my little cherub. Remember that the devil is a cherub, a fallen cherub. All right. So, and this is also something to consider, actually in terms of then the ranks of angels, the archangels are the 8th choir. So they're actually a lower choir than the cherub. So how does Michael, who's an archangel, defeat a cherub, who's a pretty powerful angel? He does it because he has the grace of God to help him. What Michael and his army are able to do are defeat Satan and his army, who are pretty powerful spirits, fallen, but they have lost the grace of God. And that's why they have no power over us. Where Michael, given the grace of God, and then entrusted with a mission. That's another thing to consider with the archangels. Not only they're not just messengers, they're seen as messengers for specific causes in the life of the church or in the life of our faith. You see Raphael in the Old Testament. He brings healing. That's why the name Raphael means God's remedy. Right? Gabriel, God's messenger. He brings the message of the incarnation to Our Lady. Michael, who is like God, he is there standing as a defender of the goodness and glory and power of God against the one who tried to stand up to God. And so this is what we're praying for when we pray this prayer to St. Michael the Archangel. But that important line, Satan and the evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls. Because let's face it, if we're trying to live a life of faith here in this world, we're going to find attack. It's not going to be easy. So having the power of a heavenly intercessor who has done battle with the evil one and came out victorious, he is going to help us in our own struggles against the evil one. And so as there's renewal in this devotion, I wanted to also incorporate this into our own life of devotion here at the parish and in conversations with the other friars, with Kathleen, with with others, trying to find the best way to do that. And I wanted to wait until this Sunday in particular, because it would be the Feast of the Archangels. It won't be celebrated liturgically because it's a Sunday, but I thought it was a fitting day to begin it. There will be, I don't know if you touched upon this, but some of our high solemnities here at St. Patrick's where we have brass music. You did, yeah. So where, we would have kind of go back to a recessional hymn, and those would be days where we wouldn't do the St. Michael prayer, or if anybody wants to wait around and, jump in, and if the priest forgets, I may need to appoint somebody at each Mass to say, you're the person who could start the St. Michael prayer if the priest forgets. The one other thing, I'll point this out. We have those handout cards that are in the basket if you've come to daily Masses. I've had a little battle on weekdays between the casters and the thrusters because a lot of people are used to saying cast. I made the cards based on what's here in the Lumen Christi Missal, and it says thrust. And that is one thing I do want, if we, to do this prayer, that we stay consistent, because you could have many versions of the St. Michael prayer going, and I don't want competition, between, It hasn't been too bad. I mean, most people have been consistent. The one word that's been off has been between cast and thrust. But I'm just, it's saying the same thing, but it's just a matter of the translation. That's the thing. The St. Michael prayer, there hasn't been an official translation of the prayer.
There's another word that's
Wicked,
sometimes be our defense.
malice and snares of the devil, defense or protection. So that's why I'm going to ask the people use the cards that we have, or reference the book, so that we stay consistent. Because I don't want a battle between the thrusters and the casters, or the malice and the wicked ones. You know, that's defeating the whole purpose of this. So, and we are, you know. We've also looked at maybe ways we could. We're still trying to look at ways to, you know, also making the texts more easily available, because like we have those reading reference books. You know, we haven't come up with a final plan yet, but there, you know, that could be maybe a way to, so you have a quick reference either for the Antiphons or for the St. Michael prayer. So just, I would say, stay tuned on what is going to be given in the pews for easy access. But do you have any questions for me on particularly the St. Michael prayer, this devotion? Pierre.
So at Fatima, we did not have
There you go.
the angel that appeared to
Yeah.
the children in that statue.
Yeah. Right. And St. Thomas brings up that question about when angels appear. Like, he basically says it's a formulation of the air in that area. Basically, maybe we would see like as molecules. I mean, he doesn't have this knowledge of what molecules are, you know, in the 13th century. But basically the angels are making use of some matter that's there to appear before a, you know, in a material form to the human, you know. But that's what's important to remember. Angels do not have bodies. Any depiction we see of an angel is purely for a depiction to help us, you know. I joked, I said, oh, look, here's our new shrine to St. Michael the Archangel. It's a pure spirit right there. So, did you ever hear about the second-class relic of St. Michael the Archangel? It was an apparition site in France where he stood on a rock. And so after that, they started chipping away the rocks of where St. Michael stood, because I remember this priest at Steubenville when he heard about relics of St. Michael, and he said, what was it, a feather? So, you know. But not to make light of that, but remember, angels are pure spirits. They do not have bodies. So, Shannon.
St. Michael, other saints, we know they went through a process through the church, but how